Hey guys, Mrhappy here, and today we are going to go over the basics behind the Dragoon job. In this video, we will discuss single target rotations, AoE rotations, cooldowns, cross-class abilities, and some quote-unquote useful macros. You'll see what I mean later by that. Keep in mind that these rotations focus entirely on optimal situations. Should a situation be non-optimal, you may have to adjust your rotations to fit your current location around the enemy. So Dragoon, what is it? It's a melee job that deals physical damage. Using a lance, Dragoons are, most notable for their ability to utilize jumps. That's the big thing in Final Fantasy is jumps, jumps, and jumps to dive into their opponents pretty much. All their abilities have extremely high potencies and damage, although the speed in which they're used is quite a bit slower than their rival melee damage dealer, the Monk. So first let's go over the basic single target rotation. So at first, we're going to go over these rotations without the use of their jumps, and then we're going to get into the rotation with the jumps. This is just so you can get an idea of what the average rotation looks like when those jumps aren't available, when they're on cooldown, or maybe when it's a non-optimal situation and you want to save them for an, optimal situation. So the basic rotation for a Dragoon when opening into a fight is simple. You do heavy thrust once on the flank. Then you go behind them and do impulse drive, disembowel, and chaos thrust. Then you use phlebotomize, and then you go true thrust, vorpal thrust, and full thrust. And that's your basic combo. So what are the reasons behind this? Well, this rotation allows you to get the buff from heavy thrust up right away. That's a damage buff increase immediately. The debuff from disembowel is also a straight damage increase, so you want to get that up as soon as possible. And the dots from chaos thrust and phlebotomize are really, really strong, so you want to make sure those are up as soon as possible. So after completing this rotation once, you'll simply want to do heavy thrust once every 20 seconds when the buff falls off, phlebotomize once every 18 seconds when the buff falls off, and your chaos thrust combo every 30 seconds when those buffs are falling off. Try to avoid applying phlebotomize if heavy thrust and disembowel are both not on the target. It can make things really awkward due to how dots can be applied to the target. If you try to apply a phlebotomize without heavy thrust when the previous one did have heavy thrust, you're going to notice that phlebotomize didn't actually apply to the target. This can cause you to lose a lot of DPS fixing the mistake that you just made, so you really want to try avoiding that as best as you possibly can. Some situations will call for you to have to do it, but try to avoid it as best as you can. So another thing to talk about is that heavy thrust and impulse drive need to be performed from specific sides, as I said a little bit earlier. Heavy thrust must be performed from an enemy's flank or their side, their left or right side, while impulse drive must be done from behind the enemy. Should a fight mechanic not make this possible for a short time, don't risk your life trying to apply one or the other. Just wait for the right time to do it. The rest of the impulse drive combo also, you have to keep this in mind, can be done from any side. It's only impulse drive that has to be done from behind. So it's usually best to stay on the flank of the enemy until you need to apply disembowel and chaos thrust. Then you can quickly run behind, hit impulse drive, and then run back to the flank and continue your combo from there. This can also save you from a lot of tail swipe moves that enemies have, and it becomes really common eventually, so you're definitely going to want to keep that strategy in mind. So that's what the combo looks like without the jumps, but what about with the jumps? So you have three jumps. You have jump, go figure, spine shatter dive, and dragon fire dive. So you also have an ability called power surge, which will increase the damage of your next jump or spine shatter dive by 50%. So you want to do what's called weaving these abilities between your combos once heavy thrust and disembowel are up. So for your opening combo, if you're going to use all your jumps, I recommend something like this. Notice how we use power surge before disembowel and expend it afterwards on the regular jump. The reason you don't immediately expend the jump, despite having power surge available, is because of how long it would take before you could do your disembowel. You could get far more damage from only using one ability between the global cooldown. As before I said, this process is called weaving, and it must be mastered since you really don't want to use two abilities in between one ability on your global cooldown. This goes for pretty much most jobs anyway. You want to try and only weave one ability in between your on the global cooldown abilities. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. If not, I may make another video entirely about weaving to help people understand how the process works entirely. So you'll notice something strange about the rotation that also I just did. There's question marks next to both spine shatter dive and dragon fire dive. This is to denote that using these abilities in a single target rotation are somewhat situational. Not entirely. For the most part, you will have the opportunities to do that, but there are times when you won't be able to do that. In the example such as spine shatter dive, should a boss require stunning, such as maybe Chimera or Ifrit, you'd probably want to avoid using it on the boss itself. Dragonfire Dive is also incredible burst damage, so you have to decide if using it in your single target rotation is right for the fight that you're doing. I mean, Dragonfire Dive may be required for certain burst phases, so you can use it when you're doing your single target rotation, but you also have to be sure that you'll have it available for important burst phases where something has to die or you're gonna wipe. This is something such as Titan's Heart or Ifrit's Nails. These are very important burst phases that you definitely want to make sure you have Dragonfire Dive available for. Also, keep in mind it does incredible AoE damage, 250 potency AoE damage. That's a lot. So fights where AoE damage requirements are really high may either A, call for you to save it, or B, call for you to use it when you're fighting a bunch of AoE targets, as opposed to saving it for the boss themselves, if there's a boss at all. Generally though, you'll still have plenty of opportunities to use both of these abilities in your single target rotation. There just may be situations that call for it to be done differently. So before moving on to the AoE rotations, one last thing to mention is that should stun resistance not be an issue, you can also weave in leg sweep every 30 seconds. Just get it done out of the way. It's some extra damage. If stuns aren't important and you can't even stun the target, just use leg sweep. It's just some extra damage is all I'm trying to say. So now, for AoE rotations, just as with most jobs, it's pretty simple. The basics behind this is heavy thrust to apply the damage buff to yourself, into Ring of Thorn, since that ability immediately combos off of heavy thrust, so it's already sort of set in place for you to do. Dragonfire Dive, because, well, we just spoke about how good Dragonfire Dive's AoE is. And then Doom Spike spam until the heavy thrust buff needs refreshing. So there's a few specific things you need to know about this AoE rotation. Doom Spike's AoE is sort of a line. In fact, sort of a line. It's a straight line in front of you. So this really only works if the mobs that you're AoEing are being tanked very still and you have time to line up your shot. If not, you may want to continue using heavy thrust into Ring of Thorns. 2, this rotation is super TP intensive, and if a fight has more than just this AoE phase that you're expending all your TP on, you're really going to have to play this one carefully. You have to be conscious of how much TP you have at all times. Just as you fall below 500 TP, you'll want to use Invigorate and AoE a few more times. Should your TP dip below 500 again while AoEing, you just stop AoEing and start using your TP doing a single target rotation. Worst case scenario is you're going to AoE all your TP away and have not enough damage for the single target parts of the fight. So you really have to be careful here, guys. Now, even though that's it, by the way, for the AoE rotations. There's nothing special about that at all. Now, even though we've been over both rotations, there are plenty of cooldowns that we didn't discuss that we should. First are the Dragoon's own abilities, such as Life Surge. Life Surge forces your next ability to automatically critically strike. So it specifically notes non-magical damage, meaning you unfortunately can't use it with Dragonfire Dive. That would be awesome. So it's also to avoid you being able to use it with your AoEs for the most part. Usually the best place to spend this ability is on Full Thrust, since it does 300 potency, so to be sure to prep this whenever you want to do big crits with your Full Thrust ability. It also heals you, so saving it for a big crit in a healing intensive phase sees that the ability is used to its maximum. This can mean, for example, using it during Titan Stomps. You want to hit a crit real quick. You really need to kill the heart, but he's stomping, so you use it, you crit, you heal. Healers are all like, yay, and you're all set. So next, you have Blood for Blood, and this should be used to boost your damage whenever available. Now, on a Dragoon, it boosts your damage by 30%, so it's even more effective. But keep in mind that you do also still take 25% more damage, so using it during an AoE phase of a boss is not good. Trust me, there's no fun in taking an extra 25% damage when you're barely surviving a move before. An example of when not to use it, as opposed to Life Surge, is during Titan's Tumults, or his Stomps, as I was calling them before. So next, you have Invigorate. We spoke about it briefly before. It regenerates your TP. It's a bit stronger on Dragoons than other jobs. It regenerates 500 TP instead of 400, so use it whenever you dip below 500 TP. Don't save it when you're at 100 or 200. Use it immediately under 500. Now, the next ability is Keen Flurry, and it may be used to raise the parry chance against certain abilities in a fight. So it's really just a defensive cooldown. So save this when you may be tanking a mob, like maybe you're AoEing a mob and you have one of them on you. That's a good time to use Keen Flurry. There's a few specific spots where you will find it's useful. Right now, it's not too many spots, but they are there, so just have it on your bars. Don't just throw it out, please. Feint. Feint is the next ability, and this is not that useful on pretty much almost everything in the game. However, it is useful on bosses that can be slowed. So, unfortunately, that's just very few bosses in the game. You have to find your uses for this one, but for the most part, you can ignore it. One example of someplace you may want to use it is on the Dorme Chimera. It does lengthen his Ram's voice and his Dragon's voice cast times, as well as all of his other cast times for a short time. So, it's actually really good for that fight in particular, but unfortunately, not many other fights. So, Piercing Talon is a ranged move that Dragoons have. It's basically just a lance throw that you can use if you're unable to reach a target, but you still need to be dealing a lot of damage. Just ensure, that's all it is. It's just to ensure that you're always dealing damage to a target. If you're trying to regenerate TP, though, you may find that not using it may overall increase your TP, because Piercing Talon does cost quite a bit of TP, so don't spam it even if you're far away from a target. Just maybe once at best if it would help. For the most part, you probably won't use it, to be honest, but I'm just listing what it is probably meant to be used for. So finally, you have Elusive Jump. This just allows you to break binds and movement slows and jump backwards. You look really cool while doing it, so that's always a plus, and you can use it to evade certain moves at the last second. Just be sure that whenever you do use it, that you don't jump yourself into oblivion. For example, jumping off the edge of Titan. Titan's just the perfect example for everything. Jumping off the edge of Titan's Arena. Don't do that. Just don't do that. That's a bad idea. Now, that's it for Dragoon's secondary abilities, but we also have to talk about their cross-class abilities. Now, Dragoons pull from Pugilists and Marauders as their subclasses as of patch 2.0. You may be watching this during a future patch, so it may not be applicable at that point anymore. Now, due to this, I recommend taking the following abilities: Second Wind, Internal Release, Foresight, Bloodbath, and Mercy Stroke. Those are the 5 abilities that I recommend. Mercy Stroke should be added to your single target rotation whenever your target reaches an HP threshold to be damaged by it. Second Wind, Foresight, and Bloodbath should all be used defensively to help regenerate HP or prevent damage, and Internal Release should be used whenever available. It has a super short cooldown of only 60 seconds, so it increases your crit chance. Just use it. You may save it for certain fights where you need offensive cooldowns for specific parts, but for the most part, you're going to be using it whenever it's off cooldown. So one last thing to talk about is that if you're wondering why we don't use Fracture, it's because it delays your combos by a significant amount if you try and sustain it throughout the entire fight. Additionally, you have powerful dots already in Phlebotomize and Chaos Thrust, so the last thing you need is another dot running your TP dry. Phlebotomize does more initial damage, does the same damage over time. You really don't need something to mimic that as well. It's basically just going to take away from the time that you have to do your basic combo, your full thrust combo, or your other combos. So it may be difficult to weave in with all the abilities Dragoon's already trying to do that are on the global cooldown. So that's it for abilities, for single target rotation, AoE rotation. That's it for all that. So the final section of this video will be macros. I'm doing this out of requests by my viewers, but I'm telling you right now, there aren't many useful ones. I mean, you can place your offensive cooldowns on a single button using a macro. I did this in my Bard video too. This will allow you to press the button repeatedly in order to gain the buffs one by one. You have to press it repeatedly or it doesn't work. It doesn't do them all automatically because, as I said before, that goes against the whole sort of weaving thing, where you can do one cooldown, use an ability, then use the other one and use an ability. So it goes against that, so it doesn't use them all in one hit. So the same can be done for the defensive cooldowns such as Bloodbath and Keen Flurry, but keep in mind these macros do go out of order sometimes, so if you need them to go in order, you may just not want to use them at all. Also keep in mind that if you do macros like this where there's no wait timers between the abilities, you're going to need to go into your chat and turn off the option. I'm going to include it really quick in this video. You need to turn off error messages. If you don't turn off chat error messages, then your chat is going to be spammed with errors every single time you try to do these macros, guys. Just letting you know now. So on non-stun intensive fights, you can also add leg sweep to your abilities like this in the macro. It's very similar to the macro previously to ensure that it's always used whenever you need to press it. So there's one reason why I don't like this macro, and it's mostly because it means whenever you do a fight where stun resistance is an issue, you have to constantly remove leg sweep from whichever ability you're macroing it to, and it's just annoying to constantly do that. However, adding Mercy Stroke in the same way works a lot better since it has a long cooldown and it's meant to be used for executing targets anyway, so it won't be used for most of the fight. So using Mercy Stroke, this is actually a really good combo, is to include I don't know English, include Mercy Stroke in one of your abilities that you use very often so that when the enemy hits below 20% that you use it. you can still manually trigger it, and it's probably still better unless you just happen to be doing it right when the enemy hits below 20%. But it is more understandable than the leg sweep one, just because you won't ever have to interchange it out with something. So I always recommend holding complete control over all of your abilities and not leaving things up to macros like these. So I just don't really use too many macros. I mean, they can be quite inconsistent, and you can cost you some valuable DPS, guys. So just keep that in mind. Try and master that whole weaving ability. If you guys want, I'll make a video about it. But for the time being, this is all you really need to know about the Dragoon. People seem to think that Dragoons are, I don't know, not that good. I think Dragoons do great DPS once they learn how to weave properly. Once you learn how to weave properly and you're doing all your abilities and you know how to quickly get behind the target or to the side of the target and move fast, Dragoons do really high damage for melee damage dealers. So what's going to make them even better is recently, as of live letter 9, I believe it was. Yeah, 9, because, you know, Roman numerals and all that. They said they're going to shorten jump animations, and that is one problem that Dragoons definitely have right now, is that their jump animations take slightly longer to execute than the global cooldown actually is. So you actually lose some of your global cooldown every time you use a jump ability. They're fixing that. They're going to shorten the jump animations so that way it works more steadily. I still think that it's kind of annoying that you get killed, and they thought it was annoying too. So that's another reason why they're shortening the jump animation, is because you can get killed while you're jumping. Because you're stuck in that one spot, it's just really dangerous. So a few last notes. Keep in mind that jump, spine shatter dive, and elusive jump all go different directions. Jump will return you back to your current location. Spine shatter dive is a gap closer, and dragonfire dive is just AoE. And elusive jump jumps you backwards. So they all go different ways. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, please like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more Final Fantasy XIV information and videos, as well as going to start doing some other videos in a little bit. Start to weave in some other abilities of my own and some other videos of my own. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. If you have any recommendations, if you have any sort of tweaks that you would make to the rotations, be sure to contact me on those platforms. You can try to reach me on YouTube, but it's so annoying trying to reach people on the Google inbox. So, and unfortunately, they won't let me unplug my Google Plus from YouTube anymore. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. So try to get to me on Twitter and Facebook, guys. But anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Until next time, take care.